Ladies and gentlemen, honored supporters and guests, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to a historic evening with Eva Schloss. My name is Rabbi Ari Solish, and I am the director of the Intown Jewish Academy, the host of tonight's event. The Intown Jewish Academy is a warm, engaging, and vibrant center for adult learning. The mission of the Intown Jewish Academy is to educate our community in a meaningful and impactful way through innovative classes, courses, and events. Tonight's event is part of our community lecture series. At the heart of the ancient Jewish temple in Jerusalem was a sacred vessel known as the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was a magnificent box fashioned from wood and gold, and inside the Ark were stone tablets that were inscribed with the Ten Commandments. Actually, there were two sets of stone tablets inside the Ark. The first set of tablets that Moses shattered, and the second set of tablets that were whole. The broken tablets and the whole tablets, both were housed in the same Ark. The greatest Jewish sages of history were puzzled by this. Why preserve? Why eternalize broken stones? Why house the shattered tablets in the most sacred vessel, housed in the most sacred space on earth? Here is one perspective on this. The two sets of tablets represent two possible destinies in life. Some lives are lived whole and complete, while some lives, for reasons we simply cannot fathom, are destined to be broken. Some of us live blessed and fulfilled lives, living out long years filled with all of the joys and celebrations of life. And some of us endure pain and heartbreak, living lives that are cut far too short. Our faith teaches us that both experiences are holy, both are sacred, both have a place to be commemorated and eternalized. We recall not only the lives lived fully and tranquilly, but also the lives that were tragically cut short. Not only the lives that are whole, but also the lives that were shattered. These two are sacred, these two are holy, and these two must be remembered. And I would like to take this idea one step further. It is only in preserving, recalling, and living with the experiences of the shattered tablets and lives that we can hope to learn the lessons of how to build a world that is whole and complete and unbroken. It's only by living with a sometimes painful past that we can create a beautiful present and future for all of us. Tonight is a story of two lives, two friends who, as destiny would have it, would become stepsisters. One whose life was tragically cut short at the young age of 15, and one who, thank God, is with us here tonight. Anne Frank and Eva Schloss. Both are sacred lives, and both have stories that we must hear and preserve and learn from. Tonight, you and I have the privilege and honor to hear the living testimony of Mrs. Eva Schloss. There is a scene in the film Judgment at Nuremberg where the American judge is sentencing a German legal personality for sending an innocent Jewish man, a Jewish doctor, to his death in Berlin in 1935. The German pleads with the judge that it was just one life that he took. Had I known it would come to this, he said, that this would lead to millions, I would have never done it. The judge responds, it came to that when you sent one innocent man to death. In other words, if you can take even one life, if you are capable of being indifferent and unmoved and inhumane to even one single human being, then you are capable of doing the same to 6 million. Jewish thought puts it this way: the way to appreciate the value of all of humanity is through realizing the infinite value of each and every individual. Each and every human life is precious. Each and every human life contains infinite value. Each and every human life is created in the image of God, in the divine image. It's when we forget the value of the individual, it's when we forget or cease to dignify and respect the other, that all of humanity is endangered. And so, as I stand here tonight, I offer a prayer that we never forget the broken tablets in the sacred ark and the precious stories those shattered pieces tell us. A prayer that we always look at each other with dignity and respect and see the divine image that they too possess. And may we very soon see the time about which the Jewish prophet Isaiah spoke, a time of peace and harmony amongst mankind. Quoting Isaiah, when the nations shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. When nation shall not lift the sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. When the world will be filled with love and not hate, as we recognize that we are all truly brothers and sisters on this planet. And let us say amen. I'd now like to introduce the Honorable Felicia Moore, President of the Atlanta City Council, who will share greetings and a proclamation on behalf of the City Council.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Felicia Moore. I'm president of the Atlanta City Council. It is truly my honor and privilege to be here today. I certainly am looking forward to the program. As I was walking in, a young lady and I were talking about Anne Frank and how, as a young girl, I read that book several times and would love to hear more about that story and those others, and particularly the contributions that you all are making here in our Atlanta community. We wanted to make sure that we were here to recognize the great works. On behalf of our mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and all 15 members of council, I'd like to present a proclamation. It's quite long. I won't read it all, but I will read a few of its whereas clauses. And it says, in honor of Mrs. Eva Schloss, and in recognition of Holocaust Education Day, the Atlanta City Council recognizes the immense importance of remembering human atrocities so they were not repeated, and educating the public as to such. Miss Eva Schloss, a survivor of the Holocaust, was captured and sent to the concentration camps while hiding, like much of her childhood friend and stepsister, Anne Frank. For more than 30 years, Ms. Schloss has dedicated herself to Holocaust education and global peace, and has spoken at more than 1,000 speaking engagements, that's quite a few, and authored 3 books. And the Intown Jewish Academy has been committed to education, the teaching of tolerance and understanding, and bringing Judaism and its optimistic message of a better, peaceful world to the greater Atlanta area. This evening is an opportunity for people of all ages and backgrounds to hear a personal account of survival, as well as one for educators, clergy, and civic leaders to highlight and emphasize the innate rights endowed by our Creator to every human being. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that we, the members of the Atlanta City Council, on behalf of the citizens of Atlanta, do hereby honor Mrs. Eva Schloss on this 25th day of February 2019 and proclaim this day Holocaust Education Day in the city of Atlanta. We urge citizens to continue to recognize the significance of the Holocaust and stand united against further war crimes and genocide. It's signed by myself and all 15 members of the Atlanta City Council.
Thank you very much for being here tonight and presenting the proclamation. In addition to the proclamation from the City Council, we have a letter from the mayor that I'd like to read. The letter is dated February 25th, 2019, and it's addressed to Mrs. Schloss. It is my honor to recognize your meaningful, lifelong service as a peace activist, international speaker, and humanitarian. As a Holocaust survivor facing heart-wrenching losses, you have demonstrated the kind of courage, strength, and resilience that inspires others to persevere and join the fight for justice and freedom. Your efforts to promote acceptance while elevating others with your life-affirming story have fostered a deeper understanding and abiding respect for all. The City of Atlanta is honored to celebrate your life and legacy, and we salute the impact you have made on this world. On behalf of our entire city, we welcome you to Atlanta and offer our best wishes for an enjoyable and rewarding stay, and it's signed sincerely, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. We are hosted tonight in the beautiful First Center of the Arts on the campus of Georgia Institute of Technology. Georgia Tech is a world-renowned institute of higher learning, and I'm grateful that we are holding this special event in such an appropriate setting. Dr. Julie Ansis is the Associate Vice President of the Office of Institute Diversity at Georgia Tech. In this role, she provides leadership, ensuring that Georgia Tech achieves its diversity and equity goals, and develops and leads campus collaborations to support an inclusive campus community. Dr. Ansis has published and presented extensively in the area of racial and gender attitudes, multicultural competence, university climate, and women's legal experiences. She is also a personal friend of mine, and I'd like at this point to ask Dr. Ansis to share some words of greeting on behalf of Georgia Tech and some thoughts on tolerance and diversity. Dr. Ansis.
Thank you, Rabbi Solis. Good evening, everybody. My name is Julie Ansis, and I'm the Associate Vice President of Diversity at Georgia Tech. I would like to welcome you to Georgia Tech and to the beautiful First Center of the Arts. It is an honor to be here and experience the story of Miss Eva Schloss, a living testament to what is possible. The story of Eva Schloss represents one of endurance of great pain and hardship, profound resilience, and transcendence of the human spirit. I am so pleased to see all the diverse faces in the room and to see those representing younger generations. The Holocaust was not a distant memory to the generation of my parents, and certainly not of my grandparents. In my home, when a Holocaust documentary came on the television set, my mother used to say to my brother and I, "Watch this so it doesn't happen again." This was not an uncommon expression among the elders of my generation. As a child and adolescent, I didn't understand the connection between watching the horrors on the screen and not having it happen again. However, as I got older and saw how history is sometimes rewritten, distorted, or completely erased, I began to understand the lesson and importance of bearing witness, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. But listening and bearing witness are not enough. Judith Herman, the author of Trauma and Recovery, wrote, "In the absence of strong political movements for human rights, the active process of bearing witness inevitably gives way to the active process of forgetting. We must commit to speaking up when injustices occur, to act swiftly, to not wait until it's too late." Another message I heard growing up was that the Holocaust could happen again. That was simply incomprehensible to me as a younger person living comfortably and free of the types of persecution that my ancestors endured. But as I read history and watched events unfold, even today, I see precisely how the Holocaust could happen again. Written into Georgia Tech's strategic goals is building a community that projects an inclusive culture, one that celebrates uniqueness in thought, background, and perspectives, and one of mutual respect. But creating an inclusive community that evidences respect for all requires us to be vigilant and ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Institutions of learning must remain steadfast in their commitment to such values. So tonight, let's commit to paying attention and listening deeply, and let's commit to speaking up. I know that this often requires courage. Sometimes there are consequences to speaking up, and sometimes these consequences are significant. However, we must consider what kind of world we want to live in and whether we will live up to our potential as human beings. Love and peace requires fierce, transcendent courage. While human beings can commit great atrocities, they can also be a force for tremendous good. We see individuals demonstrate compassion, care, and kindness, even sacrifice themselves for others. So we listen tonight with the intention of being a force for good, for transcendence. Thank you for being here, and thank you especially to the Intown Jewish Academy for your work and your vision in making this event possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ansis. Before we continue with our program, I'd like to acknowledge all of the Holocaust survivors who are with us here in this room tonight. Atlanta is home to a number of survivors, and we are honored by those who have come tonight to be part of this event. I'd like to ask the Holocaust survivors in attendance to please rise and be acknowledged. At this point, I'd like to express my gratitude to all of those who helped make tonight's historic event a reality. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our sponsors who made the financial commitments to ensure that this event would be available to our community. The UPS Foundation, Delta Airlines, Georgia Tech Institute Diversity, Georgia Tech Ivan Allen College of Liberal Arts, Georgia Tech Campus Services Buzz Funds, Dr. Joy Maxey, and Richard and Marty Alterman. Thank you. I also would like to thank our community partners, Chabad of Georgia Tech, Aviv Older Adult Services at Jewish Family and Career Services, Eternal Life Hemshech, and the Bremen Museum. Thank you. I'd like to extend a very heartfelt expression of gratitude to Chabad in Town, and especially its directors, Rabbi Elio and Dina Schusterman. The Intown Jewish Academy is the adult educational arm of Chabad in Town, and I am so very grateful to be part of this incredible organization. I'd like to thank our Chabad in Town staff, especially Jonathan and Brett, as well as the dedicated First Center staff for helping make this event possible. And finally, a special shout out to all of the high school students and college students who are here with us tonight. It's so important that you are present at this event. You are our messengers to the future. Tonight's theme is all about survival and hope. We're now going to show a short documentary about the incredible survival of a song, a haunting yet hopeful melody that was composed amidst the darkest days of the Holocaust, a song that rose from the ashes.
Dark clouds began to cover the skies of Europe, the clouds of Nazism. And as they invaded Warsaw, they moved Jews, men, women, and children into the ghettos. Slowly, over time, the ghettos began to empty. Even the birds stopped singing, as if they knew what came next. The trains of doom filled with the innocent and the pure, carrying them to their deaths. And it was on one such train headed to the death camp Treblinka, in the midst of the terror, the gasping, the weeping, and the despair, that a lone voice was heard singing. His name was Azriel David Fastig, the cantor of the saintly Mosnitzer Rebbe, Rabbi Shaul Yedidya Elisar. People thought he had lost his mind, but Azriel's heavenly and sweet voice continued its soulful tune. There he was, face aglow, eyes closed in concentration as he sang the words of the Ani Ma'amin, I believe declaration. As if harmonizing with the angels, he sang devotedly of the nation's undying faith that the world would one day be a place of universal peace, tranquility, and human dignity. Gradually, the hundreds of listening ears joined his song, at first quietly, but slowly growing louder and louder. Soon the song spread from car to car, and every mouth that could still draw a breath joined in Azriel's haunting melody, Ani Ma'amin. His eyes red from crying and his cheeks wet with tears, Cantor Fastig tore a piece off of his own shirt and jotted down the notes of his new composition. There he proclaimed, I will give half my share in the world to come to the person who will take my song to my saintly teacher, the Mosnitzer Rebbe, who had escaped to the shores of the United States. A hushed silence descended upon the train, and two young men appeared, promising to bring the song to the Rebbe at any cost. Bidding farewell to their brothers and sisters, they jumped out of a hole they broke in the train's roof. One miraculously survived, and clutching dearly to the shirt, kept the melody alive. It was on Yom Kippur, just after the war, on the holiest day on the Jewish calendar, and the Mosnitzer Rebbe's synagogue in New York was filled with thousands upon thousands. As the Rebbe began singing the Ani Ma'amin, the crowd wept bitterly, swaying back and forth as if in a different world. He trembled and declared, on their journey to the gas chambers, this song was born from the ashes of millions. And it is through this song that their voices shall continue to be heard, beckoning us to carry forth the torch of human decency until all of God's children are touched by its light.
So this evening we actually have the special miracle in front of us is that I'm the grandson of a survivor, and we have great grandchildren of survivors. So this is really an incredible event. And it's a true miracle. And we all could come together. There's a song, it's called Am Yisrael Chai, which in English means the nation of Israel lives. And that's really a message that this beautiful evening has. So if anyone knows the song, please join along. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael
Amazing. Thank you, Rabbi Jake and the Atlanta Jewish Boys Choir. Anne Frank's The Diary of a Young Girl was first published in the Dutch language in 1947, 72 years ago. The first English edition appeared in 1952. Since then, the diary has sold more than 30 million copies and has been translated into 67 languages. For many of us, Anne Frank's diary was our first introduction to Holocaust studies. The diary brings us into the world of Anne Frank, a young girl who would soon be faced with unimaginable hardships and adversity. Our guest speaker grew up in the same world as Anne Frank. Eva Schloss was born in Vienna, Austria in 1929. When Germany invaded Austria in 1938, Eva's family fled to Belgium and then to Holland. There in Holland, she befriended a young Jewish German girl who was the same age. Her friend's name was Anne Frank. In July of 1942, both girls and their families went into hiding in Holland. After some time, both families were betrayed, captured, and sent to Auschwitz. Anne Frank did not survive the camps. Eva Schloss did. Tonight, we are privileged to hear Mrs. Schloss's firsthand account of survival. Interviewing her tonight will be Mrs. Audrey Galix, a producer at AIB TV, Atlanta Interfaith Broadcasters. Mrs. Galix is also on the board of the Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta, an organization committed to promoting understanding, respect, and unity among the diverse faiths in the greater Atlanta region, and to advance the influence of voices of the faith communities for the common good. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and give a very warm welcome to Mrs. Audrey Galix and Mrs. Eva Schloss.
Before I start with our interview, Rabbi, I would like to thank you. I've heard many, many rabbi speeches. I work now for quite a few years with Chabad rabbis, so I'm not a very orthodox person. I love working with them, and your speech was just really going to the heart. And I must say, the teaching of Chabad should be an example for the whole world. If we would listen to Chabad, the whole world would be in peace. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Well, good evening, good evening. With a blessing and deep gratitude and some water.
Yeah, that's necessary.
I'm so honored to have this opportunity to again welcome you, and honored to have you with us this evening. In your memoir, you speak so lovingly about your parents, Mutti and Papi, and your brother Heinz. And your story begins in Vienna, in Austria. And I was wondering if you would please start us off by introducing us to your family.
Yes, well, I was very, very lucky. I was born in a really young family, my father and mother. My mother was 18 when she got married to my father, who was 21. They met already when they were teenagers, and my father wrote with 18 to his future mother-in-law a letter: "This is a girl I want to marry, and can you give me the permission already now?" And and my grandmother wrote to him, "I have those letters. You know, you're much too young to make such a decision, and wait a few years and then come back again to me." And he said, "No, I won't wait. This is already in my mind." And this is really, they got married very young and had the children. I had the older brother very soon, and then I was born. And unfortunately, by that time, there was already the Nazi, not in Austria, but in Germany. And luckily, they didn't have any more children, because a younger child would certainly not have had any chance to survive.
Tell us a bit about Heinz. He was quite a scholar. And
Heinz was, well, he was 3 years older than me. He, well, my grandfather as well was already a musician. He wanted to become a professional pianist, but he didn't like reading music. So he was thrown out of the academy because he said, when I hear something, I just can play it. But they said, "No, you have to read music," and he refused. So, but when my brother was a little toddler, he took him already on his lap, and he taught him already with a few fingers to play piano. And my brother became really a wonderful pianist. In our apartment in Amsterdam, there was a piano, and he could play with 15. He could play by heart, just by ear as well. Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue, a very difficult piece of music. He was really, really very, very talented. But of course, in hiding, we come to this later, but I mention it now. Of course, he couldn't play. He had to be quiet. And he started to paint. And as well, he created some amazing artwork, and all in hiding. And before they were betrayed, they hid the paintings under the floorboard in this house. And after the war, I was able to retrieve them. They have religious education in school. We went to ordinary schools. So the children, Jewish children, were taken out of the class. And we had, in another classroom, Jewish education. And we had good teachers, and so we went home and said out to our parents, we want to light Shabbat candles, we want to do Passover and all that. So through good teaching, we became, our parents including, quite more observant. But through this, of course, it meant when Hitler came into Austria uninvited, he just invaded one day, and the Austrians became immediately, worse than the Germans, anti-Semitic. They stood in the street with Heil Hitler salute, with the swastika flags, and from one day to the next, we were the enemies. My brother came home one day. He was 12 years old at the time. It was completely blood coming from everywhere. And when my parents questioned him, what on earth has happened, he said, my own friends did that, and the teachers just watched it happening. This was the situation.
And was it shortly after that that your family fled to first Belgium and then to Amsterdam?
Exactly. Well, we were, and this, it was again the real terrible thing, that by 1938 and 1939, it was already very, very difficult to get a visa in other countries. If the world would have accepted many more Jewish people, then all this terrible Holocaust wouldn't have happened.
And part of your family did end up in London at that time.
Well, yes, some of them went to London, but nevertheless, we lost many, many of our relatives.
In Amsterdam, then you met Anne Frank at about age 11. You were about the same.
That's right.
So if you would describe your friendship or what she was like.
Well, I had first gone to Belgium, had to learn French, which was very difficult. In Belgium, we were not welcome. People really didn't like Jewish refugees, and I remember this very clearly. You know, in Vienna, I had always lovely birthday parties, and in Belgium, we were poor. We couldn't take anything with us. You were not allowed to take anything with you, and we lived in a little boarding house, and it was my 11th birthday, and I wanted a little party, and I asked if I could invite a few little girls. And the landlady said, okay, 4 or 5 little girls. And I gave them all an invitation. And the day of my birthday, they all brought a letter from their parents that they were not allowed to come to my party. I was heartbroken. I went home crying. I said to my mother, we didn't have a quarrel. What on earth has happened? And my mother said, well, as Jewish, they just don't want to mix with Jewish refugees. Amsterdam was quite different. They welcomed us. They were very Jewish friendly. They had a big Jewish population. And we were settled down there, and we were quite happy. But unfortunately, it lasted not very long, because we went there in late already during the war, in February 1940. And the war started in 1939. So at that time, Holland and Belgium were still free, so one could still, travel. But as soon as the Nazis came in, of course, that was finished. So we couldn't correspond anymore with people outside Europe. It was really, really very, very difficult. And so I was quite shy. I had lost all my confidence, quite understandable. And so I just walked there. We lived in modern apartments, very nice, but small. And there were, of course, no yards for children to play. So again, go and visit the Merwedeplein. That was near the first high building in Amsterdam. The Wolkenkrabber, means a skyscraper. It's still there. It looks just the same. And so there was a big open space, and all the children came after school to play there. And so one day, a little girl came to me and said, you are new here. Where do you come from? I said, Vienna. Oh, I come from Austria. I'll take you to my apartment, and you can meet my dad, who can speak German with you. And that was how I met Otto Frank, of course, never expecting that he would become my stepfather one day. But they left already in 1933, So Anne was only 4 years old. She learned Dutch very quickly. She had not experienced any anti-Semitism, so she was very, very bossy in a way. She wanted to always have a whole group of children around her. She was full of stories. She wanted to tell the stories. Everybody had to listen to her. And as well, with 11 years old, she was already interested in boys. And when I told her I had an older brother, she said, "Oh, when can I come and meet him?" But he was not interested in a little girl the age of his little sister, you know. So nothing came out of that.
But I understand that he and Margot, Anne's older sister, did study together.
They were, yeah. When later, when they had to go to the Jewish schools, my brother Heinz and Anne's sister Margot, they were both 3 years older than we were, went to the same class in the Jewish school. And Anne, she was a big chatterbox. In class, she was called Mrs. Quack Quack because she never could stop talking. She had to stay behind and write 100 lines. I'm not going to talk so much in class. But she still did that, you know, there was something you couldn't help. So we were not best friends, but I looked up to her because I realized she had no inhibition. She was feeling very, very free.
After the invasion and occupation, much like the Franks family, your family decided to go into hiding.
Well, first, of course, when the Germans came in, the Dutch said, "Don't worry, we are going to protect you." But they didn't know the power of the Nazis and their intention. So it became more and more difficult. It was first more of a nuisance, but slowly, slowly it became life-threatening, and people started to disappear. So it became dangerous to go to school, became dangerous to go shopping, because especially young people were just arrested and you never ever saw them again. So in about 1941, sometimes we had to leave our schools, which was very, very sad because, you know, you felt really cut off from your own friends. So I went to the Jewish schools, which was good teachers and all that, but the Nazis really wanted to kill the Jewish people first. So they came with trucks, went into classroom, told the children to go down on the truck, and in the evenings the parents waited for the kids to come home, and they never turned up. So they went to the police, where are the children? Nobody gave them any answer. So children were never ever seen again, and only after the war did one hear they were sent to Mauthausen, a horrific Austrian death camp, and just thrown down from the cliffs. So you can imagine life became scary. And in summer 42, 10,000 young people, the youngest was 16, that was my brother and Anne's sister Margot, to about 25, got call-up notice to be deported to Germany to work in German factories. Well, our parents were suspicious. First, they killed Jews. By that time, in 42, many people, Jewish people, had already been killed, especially in Germany. And suddenly they invite them back to Germany. So my father called us together and said, "Heinz, you are not going. We are going to go into hiding." But I couldn't find a family who would take 4 people because the apartments in Amsterdam are quite small. So we have to split up. I will go with Mutti, my mom, and Heinz will go with him. And I started to cry. I didn't want to be separated. And my father explained, if we are with 2 different households, the chances that 2 of us will survive is bigger. So with 13, that was the first time when I realized it is a matter of life and death. And that was really very, very scary. But this is what happened. So we had to separate. We were staying with different people who were usually members of the resistance and helping Jewish people. Very many of those were arrested as well and shot. So we really have to thank a lot of those brave Dutch people who risked their life to help strangers.
I happened to meet a young woman who was 13 earlier this evening and asked her what she would like for me to ask you, and she specifically said, what was it like during your time in hiding? And here you were that same age. What would you say to her?
Well, you know, I was not a good book reader yet and learner. I was very playful. I liked to play with the boys, tricks on the bicycle. I was very, very sporty. I skated, climbed mountain climbing and all that, and from Austria. And I had to sit like we sit here, day in, day out, reading, knitting perhaps, crocheting, drawing, you know. But if you do this from morning till evening for 2 years, it was really, really hard. But the worst thing were the nights, because the Germans knew that people hadn't appeared to this call-up notice, and they really wanted to catch every Jew. So they came at night, knocking on doors, ordinary Christian homes. People had to open the door, and they stormed in and searched the houses. So in every hiding place where we were, we had a hiding place within the hiding place, meaning the people from the resistance again came to look over the apartment and thought, well, we make a false partition here, sometimes even in a wardrobe, sometimes even under the floorboards. And so at night, when this knock came, we quickly had to go there and hoping that they wouldn't find us. But there was, for instance, a story going around in another apartment where people were hiding. They felt the beds, they were still warm. So they demolished the whole apartment till they found the people. So you can imagine when people hear this, after 5 months in a house, people said, well, we can't take the tension any longer. You have to move somewhere else. So we moved in those 2 years, so we were in 2 different places, but the same thing happened to both of us. We had to move around perhaps 6, 7 times. And in 42, we were betrayed. It's a complicated story, but I've seen many of you have bought the book, and I describe exactly what has happened. We were betrayed by a Dutch nurse who was a double agent. So many, many Dutch people were very good, but nevertheless, there was still, like in every country occupied by the Germans, was still a big Nazi party. Those were usually people who thought, well, Hitler is going to win the war, and then they're going to get good positions. And as well, you got 5 guilders, which perhaps is like $5 at the time, per head of a Jewish people if you betrayed them. So like the Frank family, they were betrayed, only they never found out who betrayed them. We knew it was a Dutch nurse. So 4 people was 40 guilders, which was at the time quite a considerable sum. So, and many, many women worked as well as, you know, working together with the Nazis.
It was your 15th birthday?
It was my 15th birthday. That was a day, as you can think, I will never forget. The Nazis stormed in where we were hiding in daytime and took us away. And hiding was difficult, and I thought this is already, nothing worse can happen. But it was just the top of an iceberg, what we experienced afterwards. This was still plain luxury.
And if you would, these are, I trust, very difficult memories, but to the extent that you are comfortable, if you could walk us through what happened after that, the transport.
Well, first I was interrogated. They beat me up, and they wanted to know where we got our money from, who has helped us, who got us the ration cards and all that. But I must say, I was in shock. I lost my speech. So though they beat me and they threatened they would kill my brother, I just couldn't say anything. And then we spent the night in a prison, and then we were taken to a holding camp. And this is quite an interesting story, which I don't usually tell because there's so many other things to tell. But we were taken to a holding camp, and from there you went then eastward to Germany or Poland. And I was 10 days in this holding camp. But I always tell, and in my book you will read, I said we were arrested on Tuesday, on Wednesday we were taken to this holding camp, and on Friday we were put on transport. And I spoke a couple of years ago for the first time in this holding camp. And I told this story. I don't remember anything from Westerbork, it's called, because I was there just 2 days. And the director said, no, you were there 10 days. I said, no, impossible. He said, yes, I show you the record. So I was so much in shock that the 10 days of this time that we were there is completely gone from my memory. Even when I knew I was 10 days there, and I tried to think, and I don't remember anything whatsoever. So you can imagine what it meant to knowing that you are arrested, taken to a death camp probably, and probably your life would come to an end with 15 years old.
And you were transported then east? What?
Well, from this holding camp a week later, we were pushed in, well, you have seen probably those pictures of this, it's goods trains, you can call it, or a container really, not meant for human transportation. There were just 2 buckets in, nothing, just the floorboards, and just a little slit for a little bit of air, and nowhere to sit, so you had to stand most of the time. There was not even room for everybody to sit on the floor. The only good thing was that was the last time that we were together as a family. And my father, with tears in his eyes, apologized to us that from now on he can't protect us anymore. You know, dads, if you are dead here and you can't look after your children, you know, your children might be in danger of their lives, but there's nothing you can do to help them. That must have been for my father a terrible, terrible thing. And my brother, the last conversation I had with him, he told me about his paintings, and he told me before they fled from that house where they had been blackmailed and went into the hands of this nurse who betrayed them, they hid the painting under the floorboard in that house with a note on it. These paintings belong to Heinz and Erich Geringer, and after the war, I'm coming to pick it up again. And of course, he never could pick them up.
In your memoir, you write very frankly, very authentically about the daily humiliations and degradations. How were you able to survive this? How?
Well, every survivor will tell you there was a lot of luck. You just needed a very, very silly little incident which helped you through again a little bit. And don't forget, I was just 15 years old. I'd experienced a wonderful life, and I really wanted to have that. I wanted to have a boyfriend, I wanted to get married, and for all, I wanted to have a family, I wanted to have children. So I never, ever gave up hope. I don't know if you're aware of many books of an Italian survivor, Primo Levi. He wrote many books, he survived Auschwitz, but in all his books he said he knew when somebody was going to die, when they'd given up hope. As soon as you give up hope, because you had no strength, just through your mind, so not giving up, did you have a chance? And I was always a very stubborn child, so that did help me. But as I say, there were many, many, I must actually call it miracles. The first miracle was after the terrible train journey, so we jumped down and we realized we were in Auschwitz. And we knew what Auschwitz meant because the British, the BBC, said broadcast out to all the occupied countries in their own language. So in Dutch, I remember it was 9 o'clock. You were not allowed to listen to foreign radio, only to the local one and to the German one. But the people from the resistance where we stayed always listened to the British. And so they told the progress of the war, but they always as well mentioned the 300 death camps in Germany and Poland. And Auschwitz was always mentioned as the biggest, where Jewish people were systematically being gassed. So you can imagine when we realized we were in Auschwitz, what we thought. But nevertheless, so the first thing was men and women to different parts. If you have ever been there, you might have remembered there are huge, huge areas, and Auschwitz was a men's camp, and Birkenau the women's camp. And so men and women had to go to this, about 3 miles apart from each other. So the men had to go to Auschwitz and the women were in Birkenau. And you can imagine that scene, fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, husband and wife, saying goodbye on earth, assuming probably they will never ever see each other. And I remember very clearly, my father took me by the hands and he looked very, very seriously at me with tears in his eyes. And he said, God will protect you. As I say, he was not religious, but at that moment, he knew he couldn't look after me, but he gave me over to God. So the men walked away, and then Mengele, you might have heard, the camp doctor, came, and the first selection was taking place. We had to stand in rows of 5, and in a fraction of a second, he decided life or death. If you were a child, a toddler, old, you didn't ask the age, just how you looked, you went to one side. The other people stayed there. And I was only 15, I wasn't particularly tall, I was quite pale, being indoors for so long. And my mother had in Westerbork, she got a hat and coat from somebody. I had just a dress. And my mother gave me that, and I didn't want it, it was hot. And she said, well, perhaps it comes in handy later. Later, you know, we didn't think there was a later. Nevertheless, and the hat had a big rim. And when Mengele looked at me, he didn't see how young I was. Many girls from our transport who were even 17 or 18, were small, went to the wrong side. So this was the first miracle, really, that I passed the first selection.
It was also a miracle. Was it your cousin, Minnie, who was working in the hospital?
That was even a bigger miracle, because she later saved the life of my mother. I was naughty. You know, we didn't get anything to eat from the morning till late at night. It was very hot in June, and I passed the water tap and I drank water, and they told us the water is not clean. So, but you know, you didn't get, in the morning you got a little mug of liquid, and you know, you needed, well, I thought I was parched, I needed to drink, and I drank, and I got typhus. And I got very, very ill, and my mother wanted to take me to the hospital. There was a hospital, it's not a real hospital, it was just a barrack where Mengele, this doctor who decided who was going to die and to live, did experiments on women. He operated without anesthetic, he took out organs to see how long people could live like that. Terrible, terrible things. So people warned my mother, don't take Eva to the hospital, she'll never come out alive. My mother said, well, she'll die like this anyway, I have to take her. And so she dragged me to this hospital, and before I went in there, a woman comes out, and my mother and the woman stood stock still, And then suddenly they ran to each other and embraced itself. And that was a cousin of my mother, her best friend as well. We lived in Vienna, they lived in Prague because it used to be the Austrian Empire, and she had been deported via Theresienstadt and was sent to Auschwitz. And her husband was a skin doctor, and through him she worked in the hospital. And so she was able to give me some medication without me going into the hospital, and I got over the typhus. So, you know, you can imagine this Auschwitz so big, Birkenau, and there was A, B, C, D camp. In each camp were 10,000 people, and to be in the same spot at the same time from different countries of Europe, you know, this is just unbelievable. So another miracle. And the last miracle, there were quite a few more, but the one which was really just unbelievable. Life in Auschwitz was, of course, terrible. And we were full of lice. And once a week, washing, during the week you never washed. And once a week we had a shower and we were deloused. And one day, it might have been perhaps August, September, and one day we come out of the shower and there was Mengele and the selection was taking place. And naked, we had to parade in front of those Nazis, and they turned you around and looked at you, and I passed, and my mother was behind me, and he looked her over a couple of times, and then he put her to the wrong side. With 40 other women from this Dutch transport, and those naked women walked out of the barrack to be gassed. So you can imagine how I felt. It was terrible. But in the night, I was still able, taking a big risk, to go where this Minnie was sleeping. And I told her what has happened. And then we were moved to a different part of the camp. And I assumed my mother had been killed. And
it was around that time you also had an opportunity to see your father, correct?
yeah, it was the other. It became winter. It was very cold. It was one of the coldest winter on records. And I had terrible frostbite. I lost my shoes in the snow, and my toes were open, bleeding. I was starving. Most of the people from our Dutch transport had taken me away because the Russians were approaching. We didn't know that. But the Germans emptied the camp every day. Barracks were emptied and the people disappeared. And so I was sitting alone working, well, alone, not with my Dutch friends anymore. I felt completely abandoned. I had no idea my father and my brother were alive. I knew my mother had been killed. I was really on the point of giving up, and because I could hardly walk anymore. And I was, it was really terrible. And then a couple, those were the people who organized everything, said, somebody wants you outside. And I thought, well, that's it now I'm going to be killed. And I go outside, and there stood my father with an SS man. This is, never ever did that happen, that a man came from the men camp to see somebody, or, we never saw any men from the camp. And this was, of course, I couldn't believe it, and my father, we embraced, of course. But the next thing, of course, I asked, how is Heinz? Oh, he's still okay, he said. And then he asked, where is Mutti? And of course, I had to tell him that she had been gassed. Well, my father, in front of my eyes, he just crumpled up. And we both cried. And then he said, well, the war will soon be over. Just hold on, we'll be together again. And Mutti is protecting you. And but I could see he just couldn't cope with this. And then he and Heinz were taken away as well on these death marches, which later was called the death marches. And a group of Dutch people from our transport came from another part of the camp because the gates were open. You could have gone out, you know, but we couldn't because where would we go? And and those people said to me, "That's in my mother." And I didn't believe it. I thought they just wanted to cheer me up. They said, "No, no, no. And Minnie, your cousin or your mother's cousin, is protecting her. She's hiding her." So I realized it must be true. And they said, "Try to go to it, this there and there and there. Try to go there." And eventually I was able to go there. And indeed, she was there. She was saved. This is, again, unbelievable story. And when I wrote my first book, Eva's Story, my mother wrote herself still a few chapters of the book what had happened to her. And she was saved by miracle. But one of the things she wrote, when she was walking to the gas chamber, she prayed to God to protect her children. She said, "I'm ready to die, but please let my children survive." She was 40 years old. After the war, like you probably know, she married Otto Frank in 1953. They were married for 27 years, and she was 91 years old when she died. So if you don't call this a miracle, I don't know. Yeah. So, and there are many more of those incidences, which, you know, without those, I would certainly not sit here.
In January of 1945, the Russians liberated
the Russians came. This was, you know, I know everything bad that is going on in the world, it's the fault of the Russians, but we have to say.
But your description of these men is just absolutely precious.
The Russians are just the most wonderful people in the world, you know. They liberated us. There was no raping. They were really looking as if we were their own parents or their own children. They were the best people in the world. They gave us Russian uniforms. They fed us. They transported us eastward because they were fighting a very, very fierce war. You know, they lost 30 million of their people. The war was really fought on Russian soil till the invasion, till 1944. You know, we thank them. Many, many, many more thousands of Jews would have perished if the Russians wouldn't have liberated all the camps in Poland and Germany. That's really something we have to be grateful. I went back to Auschwitz in 1995 because, with my husband, because Russians were going to be there who liberated the camp, and I wanted to say a proper thank you to them.
By any chance, did you meet anyone who may have liberated you or who you might have met?
Well, not, I mean, you know, when they came in 45, 44, 45, they were young men. When I saw them in 95, they were old men with big beer bellies. It was a bit a disappointment for them. But it was really worthwhile to say thank you to them properly, you know. And they took us away from Auschwitz. Well, first we were 10 days on our own, and I went to the men's camp to try if I could find my father and brother. And, but there were as well about 300-400 men left because all the other people had been taken out the camp, and people walked into Germany and Austria, and many, 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 many people perished. And those were called after the war the Death March, because you can imagine how weak, without food, without clothes, to walk in the winter, how can you survive that? But of course we didn't know exactly what had happened. But I looked around, and I found 2 people who I'd known in Amsterdam, and one of it was Otto Frank. I didn't know that the family had been in hiding. I didn't know that they'd been arrested. And of course, the first question Otto asked me if I had seen his wife or his girls. But of course, I hadn't seen them. But he had seen my father and brother, but he said they have gone with the Germans. But at that time, I didn't know about the death marches.
So some of the most touching stories of your liberation also involve when you and your mother were in Odessa and leaving the place, the opulent palace where you were staying.
We were housed and traveling through Russia. We were from end of January till May. We traveled with the Russian eastward because they were pursuing the Nazis. So very often we had to stay on the train for days till the line was free to go the other direction, because it was more important to get the troops and the equipment to fight the Germans. So it took a long time. And you can't imagine the devastation that scene. The Germans had burned down every town, every village, had shot thousands of people. There was nothing to eat for the people. They had taken everything, had burned everything. It was terrible. And you might have heard when the Russians went into Berlin, into Germany, they looted and raped and behaved very, very badly. But they went there to revenge themselves for the terrible things the Nazis had done in their own country. And so in May, when we waited there, then my mother and me, we had already had food, you know, from January till May. We were already quite strong again, and we were already very adventurous at the time. And we said, well, we never come to Odessa. We have to go and explore the city. But they told us, you're not allowed to go out because you know, you won't find your way back. But we thought, of course, we'll find our way back. We were quite sure of ourselves. But so we took a tram and went into town. It was quite nice. It was damaged as well, but it was interesting to see and all that. And then to find back, we didn't know how to get back. And it took us many, many, many hours till eventually we found where, because everything was in Russian, so we couldn't read anything. So it was really very scary. And when we came back, it was all a good joke, you know. They caught us at the entrance to this, where we were staying, and they put me in the guardhouse like a little dog, and they gave me bones. But they were laughing, you know. It was not out of nastiness. You just thought it was hilariously funny. So I didn't think it was so funny, but but of course they let me out again and said, you see, that's punishment from not obeying us. Anyway, eventually there came a New Zealand troop transport ship, and we went back through the Mediterranean to Marseille and right up to France. And in June, we came back to Amsterdam. And there we thought we'd get a good reception, because till now we had no money, we had no clothes, we had nothing. And nothing. We were dropped at the station, and that was it. But then we realized that, you know, that was June already after the war. May was the finish of the war. But all the other European countries were liberated much earlier. Belgium in September after the invasion, France partly, and so on. And Holland was occupied till the end of the war, and the Germans took everything the Dutch produced to feed their own people. It's understandable in a way. And in Holland it was called the Hunger Winter, 44 to 45. And people found 5 dead people in apartments, 10,000 people starved to death. People went to the farmer to find some food, came back to feed a family of 5 with 1 potato. There were no cats and dogs, all had been eaten. So, and now came refugees back. We came through France, but many people came from Germany, And you know, there was just no food, there was no electricity, there was nothing. So it was really very, very hard. But eventually, that's another story, we were able to get back to our apartment because it wasn't our apartment, it was rented with furniture. And the woman let us back in. Otto Frank had nowhere to go, and he stayed with Miep Gies, the one who rescued the diary. And he came to visit everybody to find out if somebody had seen his children. And we put adverts in the paper. It was a very, very bad, sad time trying to find out where is our family, have they survived, where are they, and so on. And eventually we got a letter from the Red Cross, very formal, not with any feeling. We have to tell you that your husband, Erich Geiger, and your son, Ernst Geiger, how they knew the names, I still don't know, died several days in May before the American army came to liberate Mauthausen, because the Americans were fighting in the south and they liberated that camp. Well, that was for us the last terrible, terrible message. You know, like I said, I had survived because I, in my innocence, thought life will go back how it used to be. But when I realized it can never, ever happen, I became very depressed. And Otto Frank as well came to tell us he had heard his whole family had gone. He was 57, buried rather late. He was 57 years old at the time. And he very often said, the only thing is what I possess is the clothes which I have on my body. I have no family, I have no home, I have nothing left. And a few days later, he came again with a little parcel under his arm. And he said, can I show you something? And he opened it very, very carefully. And it was Anna's diary. And he said, can I read you something? I said, sure, yes. And he read a few sentences, he burst into tears. It took him 3 weeks to read it. And he always used to say, I feel as if my little girl is still with me. And he showed it to everybody, and he was amazed. He knew she had written a diary, but he had no idea what was in it. And he was amazed at her young wisdom. And
I think he was even quoted as saying that he really hadn't known his daughter as well.
He always said, I didn't really know my own daughter. But, you know, later, after he met my mother and he became the grandfather of our 3 daughters, I really saw Otto was really, he helped me a lot. I was full of hatred, not just against the German, but the whole world, because I realized if the free world would have taken in more people, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. And he had no hatred, and I couldn't understand. I said, but the Germans killed your whole family. He said, yes, but I'm German. He was actually very proud of his German being. He loved the literature, he loved the language, he loved the music. He said, my family has been since 1500 in Germany, and, you know, I am a German. And he excused them. He said, well, if you look at history, every country has done terrible things. And this was the Germans now. But he had, and still I don't understand how he couldn't have hated anybody. And I was full of hatred. And he said to me, you know, if you hate the people you hate, they don't suffer, they don't care, they don't know, but you will be miserable. And I was miserable. And you know, I found in recently, because my mother had all the papers, a letter which I wrote to myself. I didn't send it to anybody, but it's dated 1st of January 1946, that life without my father and brother has become completely meaningless, and I would like to commit suicide. Obviously, I haven't done it, but that I felt like that, you know, I was actually amazed. I'd forgotten that.
How did you navigate that? How did you come out the other side?
You know, I was really, that I do remember, I was really, really, really miserable. And Otto told my mother I have to go back to school, and I felt I was already an adult. How can I mix with those kids, you know? And it was really difficult. And I took a job then when I didn't know what I was going to do. Otto and my mother decided I should become a photographer. And so already while I was still at school, I went to become an apprentice in a studio in Amsterdam because I didn't want any free time. So after school, I went to work, and I came back very, very tired, had to do my homework. I didn't want to have any time to think about life, how it had turned out to be. And my mother wrote a letter to her parents who did survive, that she has to be not only mother, but father, brother for me. And, you know, and I'm so difficult, I don't talk, and you know, we didn't talk. You know, if we would have talked how bad we both felt, it might have been easier, but we didn't. We didn't tell how we were suffering.
I mean, you mentioned before this evening and during the reception that your mother was really suffering, you were, but you put on a good face for each other.
Yeah, we tried to show that we don't care, you know, to not make it more difficult for the other one. But if we would have told how sad we are and how difficult it is, it might have been easier, but we just, that was our way to try to defend our feelings. It was really, really very hard. And when I finished school, Otto gave me his Leica. He said, I have no family anymore, I'm not going to take any more photos. That's a very good camera, and I hope you become a good photographer. But I was very miserable in Amsterdam. You know, I couldn't forget, and we were in the same apartment where we had lived with my father and brother. And Otto knew somebody in London who had a photographic studio, and he got me a place there for a year. And I went to London, and I lived in a little boarding house, and I met a young man who had come from Israel to study economics. And we both didn't have any money, and we went for long walks. We didn't talk about who we were. I said I was Dutch, which I wasn't. I was stateless, because we lost all our papers, you know. The Germans took away our papers. And he said he was Israeli, which he wasn't. He was really a German refugee. And we didn't talk, you know, we talked about our jobs. He studied economics, and he worked at a bank at this other time. And I, you know, worked at the photography and so on. And after 6 months, he said to me, Eva, I fall in love with you. Will you marry me? And when I'm finished studying, I go back to Israel, and we can start a new life. And I said, no, thank you. And he was a bit in shock. He said, why not? I said, well, I have a widowed mother in Amsterdam, and when my year is over, I'm going to go back to Amsterdam, to her. I was very, very close to her, as you can imagine. I wouldn't have just got married and get off. And then Otto Frank came. He kept an eye on me a little bit, and he came over, and I told him this young man had asked him to marry me, but I said no, because I'm going back. And he was a bit embarrassed, and he said, well, your mother and me have fallen in love as well. And once you get settled, we like to get married as well. And so I went back to this young man and said, well, you can marry me now. And this is what we did. We went to Amsterdam and got married in 1953. And we were married for 62 years. So I must say, we didn't really know each other. Through the marriage, I got to know him, and it was sometimes not a very nice surprise, but nevertheless, you know, this is what nowadays the young people, they have no patience. You know, marriage is two people from different backgrounds, different ideas. It's not always easy, but you have to compromise. And, you know, as I say, we were married 62 years, and it was really very, very harmonious in the end. But we went through difficult times as well. And, you know,
You have 3 children?
We have 3 daughters and 5 grandchildren. But unfortunately, I lost my husband a few years ago. But he was over 90, so, you know, you can't expect to live forever.
What a blessing.
So this is really in a nutshell. I haven't told you much about life in Auschwitz, which was just unbelievable that anybody could survive that. I know there are a few survivors here, and you all witness that, you know, it was all a matter of luck that you made it. And we are very, very grateful that we are still here. And most of the survivors didn't speak for 30, 40 years. It was too painful. But when we realized that the world hadn't learned anything, we realized we have to talk, we have to try to change it. And if you all belong to Chabad, there's a good chance that the world will change. Because
Eva, you, and that reminds me to ask, you have not only been an outspoken advocate of you know, answering anti-Semitism when it raises its head, but genocide everywhere. And why is that? How is it you have taken on that cause?
well, because people, you know, and especially out of different religions, you know, what the Muslims do with killing each other, what Protestant and Catholics were doing, killing each other. Christians kill Jews, Jews don't kill so many people. But this is really, you know, we are really unique, I must admit that. You know, we accept every religion. And this is really, you know, I was thinking about religion. It's something so, as I say, I'm not very religious, but I do go, when I'm around, when I can, I go on Saturday to synagogue. And that is what we need. We need one day in the week of calm and quiet and reflection. Now in London, and I think in America as well, Sunday is the busiest day, biggest day for shopping, going around. There's no peace anymore with people. And this is what we need. We need a bit of peace to reflect on life, on what is happening in other countries, what people do to each other. There are so many that has never been. You know, we are become quite rich nowadays, every European country. But we have so many homeless people in the street, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in London. You know, that's not necessary. We have to be more considerate. We have to think of other people. We have been given a wonderful planet who is rich enough to feed everybody, and we should really look around more, not just in our little circle of people. We have a responsibility to look at the whole world and try to create a harmonious, peaceful world. And this is why I don't stop speaking, especially, of course, for students and younger people who, and I have 5 grandchildren, they're all doing peaceful homework for going Christmas, they help in the food kitchens and things like that, you know. They're all good people, and I think if we all try to do a little bit of good, the world will change, and we will all be much happier. And this is really what we have given one life on earth, and we should make the most of it for everybody.
Eva, I could ask so many more questions. But is there anything you would like to say to our audience? You know, there are many students and young people.
Well, you've been a wonderful audience. I hope you will remember this. I hope you will tell your children. Even the children should tell their children, because you will never have such an opportunity anymore to hear The hologram, yes, you can, but it's still not quite the same to have the story really exactly what has happened. There's much more, of course. Like you've heard, I've written 3 books now. There's much more than I could tell you now in an hour. It's important to learn and to learn from our experience that those things are not going to be repeated anymore.
Eva, again, thank you so very much.
Thank you.